So what can you tell me?
You're wearing a blue shirt. It's corduroy. You have bad posture. It's raining outside. You look confused. Now you look angry. Now you're leaving in disgust. I'm good.
There is no way to simplify the theory of consciousness proposed by Hameroff and Penrose. What I'm going to do is read a brief paragraph that describes their understanding of near-death experiences and then kind of go from there, okay? But this is by no means am I going to try to make a treatise on their hypotheses. If you want to learn more about that, you can YouTube it, and if you have a very heavy background in physics, you might understand a fraction of what they're trying to say. Okay, so let me just read the paragraph on near-death experiences. Okay. Consciousness is ultimately a process of fundamental space-time geometry, and when the coherence driving the system stops due to the metabolic insult to the brain, the information is still in fundamental space-time geometry, which is everywhere, so it would start to dissipate. However, due to quantum entanglement, it would tend to stay somewhat localized and float above, maybe go out in the waiting room and visit relatives, as has been reported. But when the body is revived and the metabolic drive to the brain resumes, the information returns to its host, the brain. Now, what they're saying is that the organic brain is tied to another self. The information in the organic brain is entangled with a higher self, an energetic self, a self that exists on higher dimensions than what we are used to perceiving, the length, height, width, and time. There is an other dimensional self, which is consistent with what religion has been saying all along, in that there is a soul, an invisible self that survives after death. The reason that I'm presenting this hypothesis is not because I believe that the spirit arises from the biological brain. I don't believe that. But my point is that the spiritual realm and the physical realm are intrinsically linked. That is my model here. All right, that is a part of our reality. Okay. In this model, we have the organic brain. The organic brain takes in information, sight, sound, taste, touch. It takes it all in, it integrates it, and we form memories based on these experiences. If Hameroff is correct, then the basis of these memories are changes in the tubulin network that make up the microtubules within each neuron. Now, the complexity is so high that and the brain, because it is, according to their model, because the brain is a quantum computer, has the ability to interact with other parts of the brain in higher dimensions, in other dimensions than what we're normally able to perceive. We have a spiritual self, and what that means, or according to the model, what that means is that as I am having thoughts and experiences in my organic brain, my other self, is also experiencing these things simultaneously. There is a non-corporeal self that is somehow interlaced with my organic brain, and they work together. And so when this organic brain shuts down, this other self, which is a perfect copy and then some of the organic brain, is dissociated, and there's still some connection there to this body shortly after the body dies, and then it goes wherever. And that's the model that they're presenting us with. And this is really bizarre stuff, I have to admit. This is very difficult matter to grasp, and I'm having a very difficult time trying to explain it. I realize that, and understanding it was quite, understanding this stuff was quite difficult, and I'm not sure that I fully grasp it, to be completely honest. And I apologize for the stuff that I'm butchering. I'm doing the best that I can here, okay? All right. There are several evidences that the human brain acts as a quantum computer. What that means is that when events occur or are actualized or realized in one part of the brain, there is instantaneous transmission and coordination of that information with other parts of the brain. And that transmission of information, that interaction occurs much faster than is possible by normal electrochemical processes, because the brain is an electrochemical structure, okay? It operates by electricity. It communicates through action potentials, through the conduction of electricity. But there are processes that occur within the brain that occur faster than can be explained by electrochemical conduction. Now, what evidence is there to support that? Well, first we have the temporal binding problem. For example, vision. When we see an object, there are multiple areas of the brain that need to be activated in order for that object to make sense to us. And these areas are in different regions of the brain. We have to recognize the object's shape, the object's color, its motion, the semantic meaning of the object. All of these occur in different parts of the visual cortex and at different times. And yet, we consciously perceive these features simultaneously. Now, these things are happening. How does that occur? That's just an introduction to the problem. Another piece of evidence that has supported this theory that the brain is a quantum computer is what happens in tennis, for example. Not just tennis, many sports, baseball even. The speed of a ball after a serve is so great, and the distance over which it has to travel so short, that the player who receives the serve has to strike it back before he's had time to consciously see the ball leave the server's racket. Conscious awareness is too late to affect a stroke. It's too late. So how does he do it? Touch also involves temporal binding. If you tap your toe with your finger, think about it. The foot and finger sensations occur simultaneously. They do. You feel the touch on your finger and your toe at the exact same time. Yet, the sensation from your toe to your brain, to the sensory cortex, is a whole lot longer than the sensation, excuse my pop here, than the sensation from your finger to your brain. There should be a delay. When you touch, you should feel it in your finger, and then a few milliseconds later, it should come in from your foot. But it doesn't. It doesn't. How does the brain provide synchrony? So what does temporal binding have to do with quantum consciousness? If the electrons in the temporal lobe of my brain are connected to the occipital cortex and the parietal cortex, if these areas of the brain are connected through mechanisms other than electrochemical, through higher dimensions, as is suggested by quantum consciousness, then it would explain why we can perceive simultaneously events that are not occurring simultaneously. It's like this. When you hear, okay, here's another illustration. When you hear a word in a sentence, it takes a while for your brain to comprehend that word. You have to interpret that word, and you have to make associations from that word you have to make associations that couple this word to other words that you know. Okay, consider the question. Would you like to live as an aardvark or a female lion for 1 month? Now, is there any way that you could answer that question before your brain had an opportunity to interpret the words aardvark, female, or lion? No. You need to be able to know you need to know the whole sentence before you can construct a response. There's no way you can construct any kind of valid response without being able to interpret those words. And yet, multiple studies have shown that we can through functional neuroimaging, we can watch people process words in their head. We can see in real time when that processing takes place. So when you're given a word like female, lion, and aardvark, we can see female, lion, and aardvark where they're processed, where you interpret these words, so that you can make the associations and go to the data banks in your brain and pick up images and think about what these animals eat and how they live, right? And yet, studies have shown time and time again that when people hear words, it takes about 500 milliseconds in order to process those words. And yet, we are providing responses in only 200 milliseconds. How in the world can you respond to a question that you understood at 12:05 when you heard it before you heard it? So to say that differently, imagine this. Imagine, that since the brain takes some time to process these words, imagine hearing a sentence at 12 o'clock, yet at 12:05 your brain processes the meanings of the words. So by rights, you should not be able to answer the question till at least 12:06. And yet with humans, even though the processing takes place at 12:05, the answers are coming at 12:02. What it suggests is that you are hearing the words at 12 o'clock, you're processing the word at 12:05, and then once processed, your brain takes the information, sends it back in time to 12:02, and you experience the answer at the same time you're hearing the words. That's the picture of quantum consciousness. It might not be the perfect one, and you can look it up and see if you can come up with a better analogy. And again, I don't mean that it takes 5 minutes to process words, because in reality it's 500 milliseconds, so it's nowhere near 5 minutes. I just use that as an illustration to help you understand the nature of the problem here. Both the New Age movement and the Judeo-Christian movement, if you want to call it that, both religion, both say that humans are both animal, we're both biological and soul. And there's actually some support for that in the way that the brain works, that there is this other self, that we do have the ability to operate on dimensions that we can't see. If the brain does operate in dimensions that we can't see, that we step outside the boundaries of time and space as we know it, then we have the capacity for awareness of events that are remote from our bodies, because there are connections that exist that we can't see. So there may be natural extrasensory perception. The Bible doesn't say that we won't sometimes experience natural extrasensory perception. It simply says, don't hang out a shingle. Okay? Don't call yourself a soothsayer. Don't try to read people's minds. Don't try to predict the future. Don't try to read signs as though the universe, as though things were in stone, as though fate were something written in stone. The Bible does not say why it's a bad idea to get involved in these behaviors. It simply says, do not. It is considered abomination, and no clear reason is provided as to why that is. So then, what do you do with that? So yes, so we live in a universe that is a little bit supernatural. Okay, we do. What do we do about that? Do we then take advantage of that and say, let's build a religion out of the things that appear supernatural? Let's just build a religion out of it. That is precisely what many in the New Age movement have done. Now, I don't mean to pick on any one group. There's so many. There is virtually no way I'm going to sit here and try to list every possible group that's been a part of the New Age. I came across one on YouTube the other day, and I'd never even heard of this group before, so I can't say that I'm an expert in them. The group is called IONS, Institute for Noetic Sciences, if you will. And here's a snapshot of one of their websites here. And you get some ideas to what they're about I'll just read this paragraph on this particular page.